So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 1 p.m. panel session. Over the next 40 minutes, we will be discussing one of the key ongoing challenges facing Scotland's technology sector, the digital skills gap. I'm delighted to be joined by a wonderful panel, including Kerry Shaw, the Chief Delivery Officer for Code Clan, Tony Scullion, Computing Science teacher and founder of Dress Code, Peter Proud, the founder and CEO of Forit, and last but not least, Phil Ford, the Head of Digital Technologies and Financial Services at Skills Development Scotland. So welcome to the panel, thank you very much this afternoon. So just to kind of set the scene, this is an issue that many of you will already realise and see and be aware of. But I did want to begin just putting the thing into context at present. The tech sector is a huge net contributor to the economy in Scotland. Scotland's digital technology sector contributes about £7.5 billion. That's according to Scotland IS. There's about 100,000 people working in the tech sector in Scotland, and the digital tech sector grows 1.5 times faster than overall economy in Scotland as well, all from Scotland IS. The sector's creating new jobs at an unprecedented rate, but companies are struggling to fill the positions, and being the Chief Digital Officer for local government, I know that only too well, to attract new talent into local authorities or public sector. Somebody, one of the HR team at one of the councils asked me the other day, how do we make public sector sexy? Now, if I'm the poster child, we're fucked, right? So, in terms of unprecedented rate, in Q1 2022, there was 22,500 vacancies in the Scottish tech sector, and over 1 in 10 of all job vacancies are now in the tech sector in Scotland. So this is having a significant impact on business. So 23% of UK employers say the existing workforce lacks the basic digital skills and business needs. 37% of UK employers say the workforce lacks advanced digital skills and the business needs. And 74% of Scottish companies say skill shortages are having a negative impact on profitability. And last but not least, 49% of Scottish companies said that shortages are impairing their ability to implement new technologies and services. So a bit of doom and gloom there, but my panel here is going to fix that for us as well. Now, this is an interactive session. I would love to have questions coming from the floor as well. We're using Slido. There should be a QR code up there you can take pictures of. Please take pictures of the QR code, not of the panel. We're all very, very shy up here, as you can tell. But feel free to add the questions, and we will add them in to the panel as we go through. So I think we'll kick off, if that's okay, understanding the gap. So why is there not enough people with digital skills that our industry requires? So I'm going to put it to Peter first. Are traditional education pathways producing enough school leavers, being obviously an entrepreneur and founder of and chief executive of Forit? What do you think?
I mean, we've really, I think everyone's struggled to hire people, you know, and I left school in 1986, and this is where I normally hear people say I wasn't even born then. So
I wasn't.
You should have been. So anyway, yeah, I think it's really interesting. We put our staff into schools a lot to talk about technology, and I think it's really important that where the gap lies, I think, is people understanding what the tech industry is. And I think there's a misconception that it's a bunch of coders in hoodies at 3 o'clock in the morning drinking Red Bull and eating whatever snacks like Mars bars. I think you can still buy those. But and I think that's wrong. And I think what we need to do is we need to articulate what it actually is with regards to the tech sector. If you think about, you know, we're a product company. We've taken a product to market, and it's a very inclusive thing. So the first thing you've got to do is actually decide on a product to build. Right, so there's a lot of business discussion in there. So business people are part of the tech industry to build a product. You know, the next thing is you've got to define it. So you've got to, you know, you start to write it down and use business analysts. So, you know, very interesting. I think something that's important is to know your staff. So one of my guys actually told me the other day that he actually did journalism, even though he's in a tech role. I was like, right, here's a pen, get writing. You know, so I think where the gap is, I think, is the perception of what the tech industry is, right? And there's roles for everybody. And one of the things that we've been very disappointed in, we run an apprenticeship program, is how few CVs we see coming through from girls. because they don't want to join the tech industry, and I don't understand why. So one of the things I think we should fix, I'm sure we'll cover off here later, is how to get people enthused at primary school and to why to go into tech. But I think the first thing we need to do is actually start to really articulate what the tech industry is. It's not just about coding. Coding is a very small part of what's required to build a product. So it's about product definition, collect information, disseminate that information, turn it into a product, turn it into an architecture, giving it to developers, giving it to testers, giving it to pre-production testers, getting it live and running in the environment. It's probably about 15, 16 different set of skills in there, all from coders to business analysts to etc. So I think part of the reason things are not right is that we as an industry have done a very poor job of articulating what the skills, what the jobs are, what the roles are, and how flexible it can be in the industry. Sorry if I went on too long.
No, thank you. I think, Tony, you and I have discussed this at great length. This is the first time Tony and I have ever physically been in a room together. So this is a bit awe-inspiring for me, especially for dress code as well. For my daughter's 19, doing business because she was turned off from tech. She thought she needed maths for it. So, Tony, I think, for personally thinking about grassroots, being a computing science teacher and the challenge we're having, even recruiting computing science teachers, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I totally agree with... I've totally went mind blank. I was going to call you Phil there. I totally agree with Peter. For me, it's awareness and accessibility. So I think Peter's covered the awareness really well. I think there's a huge piece of education that we need for teachers, because the majority of teachers, remember, they don't come from industry. Like, I worked in Subway and Greggs, and then I was a teacher, but we're the kind of army on the ground who would champion tech for going into those roles. That's your army. So we need to help, basically what he says, articulate that for teachers so we can then push that and promote that, because that's the people who are talking to the children every single day. And then the other piece as well, it's awareness for parents and guardians and carers. So there was a piece of research by UCAS who said that at particular ages and stages of who the influences are. So it typically is your parents up until an age, and your friends, and then it does get on to, right, okay, I am interested in that area, and then it's what job opportunities and so on. But the amount of times that I've spoken to parents at parents' night and they have no idea, they're like, I don't want them to be an office worker, I don't want them to do just admin, and I'm like, nor do I. So it's really, really difficult. I think a massive awareness piece. And then, of course, the accessibility. So stats for computing science, like I say, the computing science teachers and computing science in school are your army. They're the people who will champion tech sector for you. But computing science isn't taught in every secondary school in Scotland. It's got the lowest uptake across every STEM subject, and I mean by a mile. It's got the largest gender gap. We've got the least amount of teachers. We get the least amount of probationary teachers, and for recruiting teachers as well, the actual teacher training places, it's got the least amount. So there's a lot of challenges that need addressed, but I think they all, for me, fall under awareness and accessibility.
I think it's a good question coming from the audience, and thank you, keep them coming in, because I'm trying to rapidly keep up, which keeps me on my toes as well. But do you think that computing science, or computing in particular, should be a core subject? I mean, my personal view from maybe primary school upwards, rather than just having third year at secondary, what do you think? Yeah,
I think it's not good enough to just make it a core subject, though. I think what I kind of follow, there's 9 principles that Code.org do, so they're a massive organisation who are having huge success across the country and in America, and also it's kind of getting uptake across Africa and things as well, where it is a core subject, and it's a core subject in England as well. But for us, I think it's not enough just to make it a core subject. It 100% should be. But when I say a core subject, for me, it's got to get taught at primary school, but up until third year. So it's not about forcing every single person, you must take it, to get a qualification or an exam. Typically in maths, you have to take it until you get something. But it's the reason for that for me is because up until third year right now, there's schools who do teach computing, but you get no periods in S1, or they rotate with another subject, so they only get 19 periods a year. But then when they do rotate, they might get taught by a non-specialist. So there's a lot of tricky things in there. So I do think it needs to be a core subject, but there needs to be also a full package of defining how many periods it is, recruitment for more teachers, money investment, of course, kit as well. I know me and you have spoken, Martin, many times about DPIAs and things there is so many challenges faced that impacts that experience. And so it's just such a shame that, because there is great work done out there, don't get me wrong, but it's just such a shame that it's not sort of everywhere, it's just pockets.
Cool, thank you. Kerry and Phil, I'm going to come to you in a second as well, because I think it's a couple of good questions in here about the accessibility routes to Code. I mean, Code Clan's a phenomenal organisation with the stuff you do for retraining. There's a good questions coming about, apprenticeships for 50 plus in particular. I mean, how do we tackle this gap?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, not used to the microphone. Code Clan, a large part of what we do is we fill that gap with the people who've maybe missed out on that opportunity at school. And we bring in these, career changers into the market who've maybe done something else, had a different career, had other experience, and then come and decided that actually maybe tech is for them after all. Maybe they could have a career in this. So I think it's good to have lots of alternative routes in, because not everybody's going to have the opportunity through the schools, or maybe they won't have that realization or that support that actually, realizing the wide range of roles they could do in tech. But yeah, I think then we look at, apprenticeships and coming into the field later, and I think this is a really interesting area. And Code Clan, we've got we've starting up apprenticeship, almost like a pre-apprenticeship program. So we're looking at this, or how do we get apprentices when they're working for a company to be more sort of productive straight away. And the idea is that through things like our youth academy that we're doing, you can put your apprentices or people who've not had that experience at school can come for a 4-week course and come out of it with enough skills to just be able to get going on something, and then perhaps take an internship, and then they get more. It's a chance to give more people exposure to see if tech is really for them. I think that's one of the things I love about the programme. We've had one run through of it, and we're planning more in the new year.
Cool. So, I mean, over to Phil, and I think it's a good question here as well that kind of links into this. There's obviously a large number of high vacancies are actually in London, and I keep getting requests to come down to events in London. That's a whole day at the office. I can't afford that in the public purse, thanks so much. So how do we attract tier 1 people, to Scotland, tier 1 companies to invest in Scotland? And I'll go to you first, and then maybe to Peter with his experience in Microsoft. But how do we sort of fill that gap at Skills Development Scotland to attract talent like this?
So I just wanted to say a few comments more generally about what's happening in the labour market, and then I'll come on specifically to answer that question. But we have a very tight labour market at the minute, and you've seen the sheer number of job adverts that are there, particularly in the digital and tech sector. There's a record number of job postings, and there are really 3 structural challenges that have constrained the supply of people, and this has an impact on companies that would look to invest in Scotland. So we have seen over the last few years lower rates of migration into the country. We have seen, after Brexit, a reduced flow of European Union nationals, and we have fewer people of working age and an ageing population within Scotland as well. So those are some of the structural challenges that have an impact in supply. And so for companies that are looking to invest and come in, they're obviously wanting to be able to access people, either apprentices or skilled people, to take advantage of the jobs that they've got. I think one of the challenges is that these companies are also competing with a lot of other companies who historically are not been in the tech sector. These are non-tech sector roles, but they've become increasingly more automated. So we need cybersecurity professionals in health, in agriculture, a whole range of other sectors which are non-tech. So there's a wider digital economy challenge in terms of the access to tech skills and a shrinking pool of people to take those opportunities. So how do we address that? I think part of that is promotion, and other members of the panel have touched on that. How do you promote the career pathways that are available to young people who are seeking to come into the sector? How do you get parents on board? How do you get teachers on board? Because the world of work now is very different to the way it looked a few years ago, and it's changing at such a massive rate. There are huge opportunities here. And so apprenticeships provide an opportunity for companies that are looking to invest to access the skills and talent that they need as well. And there are more apprenticeship pathways than there ever have been. They are available to people of all ages, although the majority of funding, of course, is for young people 16 to 24. We have 3 apprenticeship pathways now. So we have foundation apprenticeships, where young people at senior phase in school can get some life experience, work experience with a company, and hopefully then progress on into the tech sector. And we've seen a rise in foundation apprenticeships over the last few years, We have graduate apprenticeships as well, and we have frameworks that go all the way up to master's level, SCQF level 11 in areas like cybersecurity, data science, software development. And actually what we're seeing now in modern apprenticeships is not just the pure tech qualifications, but also integrated qualifications. So we've just launched a digital and manufacturing apprenticeship. We've launched another digital tech apprenticeship, which is an input from the construction sector, from financial services and the public sector. So these are skills that are applicable everywhere. And we have a number of modern apprenticeships in areas like data analytics, digital marketing, creative and digital media, and so on. So the pathways are there, but there's a bit of work still to be done to promote the opportunities, to promote where the pathways will take individuals. But if we can build up on that work that's happening in the schools, and we can also support people who are looking to upskill and retrain through organisations like CodeClan, that will build up the available talent that's there to meet the skills needs of employers and companies that are looking to invest in Scotland.
Cool, thank you. I'm going to move on in terms of some of the stuff, because some of the questions link in. And by the way, Sharon, who is out there, great surname, by the way, Sharon Wallace, thank you. So persistent challenges, what are the key challenges? What's holding us back? I mean, it's a good question in here in terms of, is it time we change the name computing science to something more generic to entice them, to make it more industry specific, such as cyber, etc.? What do you think, Tony?
I know I've had kids come to me and they do computing, and one of the first questions I always ask them is like, what do you think computing science is? And a lot of the time they do think it's just science on a computer, and obviously that's from the name. The big problem though about it is a lot of teachers do, they love the NPA. We've got an NPA in cyber, NPA in data, NPA in esports coming out. Teachers want to do it, like we do, but the problem is we are limited to the amount that we can physically have on our timetable because we don't have enough staff. So I was very fortunate that the school I worked in was 4 members of staff. That's massive. The majority of computing science departments are 1 or 2 people. So you just cannot physically have all the stuff that you want on. And then it is that thing of, but you don't want everybody to go down, cyber or data. You kind of also want just a well-roundedness. And I think that's where computing science, it fits. With the name though, like you say, is something that's always kind of raised. Could we come up with something better maybe? Do teachers really want to advocate and do all those other pathways? Oh, absolutely. Like, we want to do computing and data and games and cyber, but we just don't have the staff.
In terms of as an employer yourself, Peter, you've obviously done a lot of stuff with apprentices to recruit, and obviously 14 years at Microsoft as well. I mean, what do you see the key challenges that are holding us back, coming from private sector, big tech, integrating your own tech organisation and getting apprentices?
It's interesting. I was a bit longer than that, actually, at Microsoft. And one thing's really interesting. When I left Microsoft, I thought I knew quite a lot about business, and then I started a business myself. And after 5 years, I wrote a presentation of what I wish I'd known day one, and it was about 22 pages long. So obviously, I didn't know very much. So kind of whole life learning, I think, is super important. Going back to what Tony was saying a little bit, I mean, we've had a couple of discussions in the past about potentially just doing something a bit different. So taking, say, 3rd and 4th year university students and paying them to go into primary 4, primary 5 at primary school and adding it into the curriculum, both for the pupils and the students. So not to be teachers, but to be kind of, when I was a kid at school, we got drama and we got PE and art from specialists. Mm-hmm. So why couldn't we have technologists who are actually at university, 3rd year, 4th year university students, more than capable to articulate to a 10 and 11-year-old how to do a bit of code. So I think maybe we should start looking at things like that could be paid for. I met the ambassador of Estonia a couple of weeks ago, and he's invited me down to a dinner next week to talk about this very thing. And he said that when he came out of communism in 1991, they put a big focus on education at that time, and they invested a lot in this area. And they've had 10 unicorns in the time that we've had none, when they've got 1/3 the population. Mm-hmm. So I think what we need to really start to articulate is this is a long-term game. So that's something. On the apprentice, I was an apprentice. When I left school, I was relatively smart, but I didn't have a lot of aspiration because I was brought up in a council estate in Fife, and I thought everyone lived in council houses, and because we never really left, to be honest. And the first time I was on a plane was to get a scholarship, and it I think that's one of the things that I think we maybe lack a bit is inspiration. So if we can start to inspire the kids to have aspiration for themselves, to embrace education, to then take hold of the opportunity, I think we could actually make a big difference there as well. On the apprenticeship front, we've started 16 apprentices in my time. 11 have graduated so far. We've had 7 firsts and 4 2-1s. So it's pretty good. And, there's nothing better than being at one of these events when a parent comes up and hugs you and saying, thanks for changing my parent's life. I'm not really a kind of emotional person, but I could feel a little bit of a tear coming to my glass eye. But, I think we just need to get back to some basics. Just let me go back to a couple of points going through as being part of the core curriculum. If you think about maths, I was pretty good at maths when I was young. And if you think about what can be done now, if we could actually kind of get the kids to do little programs as part of their maths syllabus to actually write code to do some of the equations, they're actually learning coding at a basic level as part of another subject. So if we could start to think about doing that, so maths and physics and chemistry, if we can actually get kids to write code, as part of that curriculum, then they realise that the code is actually just another language to actually tell somebody to do something. And that's all lines of code is. It's a bit like writing an English essay, right? It's got to have structure. It's got to have, I was a developer, I'm not anymore. I wouldn't claim to be because I'm a bit out of touch. But I understand enough to know the architecture and the structure and the code, and I think that's important. So this just along those lines. But get back to basics, get it there, inspire people and get them into the industry.
Okay, I'm going to try and condense quite a lot of the questions into one and go back to the panel. So I think there's I can't find the question on my screen here, but there was a question in relation to, are we putting people off because we're looking at degrees to get into this? Somebody here in the audience who's been at school, and there's an opportunity for apprentices, but it's not mentioned at school. There's also a big thing, which is also close to my heart, is about we need more girls in the tech sector. In the last panel, I think it was 80% attendance was from females in particular. So, the Women Tech panel was 80% female attendees. How do we address this constant challenge? And also back to Shan's point about the 50 plus, are we cutting our nose to spite our face by looking at young people in this when we could actually retrain? Because obviously, it's proven with Code Clan in terms of this. So anybody want to pick that one up and try and answer all of that in one go?
I'll pick up some of it.
Thank you.
I think it's important that, there's no one approach here. It needs multiple changes, multiple improvements, multiple different avenues on here. Code Clan's one of them, schools are another. And I think there's a mix here of can we improve the curriculums? Can we get more people interested? I'm sure there's loads of great work we can do there. I'll leave that to the experts to answer. But one of the things we have at Code Clan is there's loads more people that want to do our courses than can afford to, and it'd be lovely to see more funding in that space for people who are coming to career changes later in their life or apprenticeships later in their career, and realising that absolutely you can have a productive career and you can come and join the tech workforce later in life, and you bring loads and loads of valuable stuff to it, loads of valuable skills, loads of valuable life experience that we can't always get in there. I think picking up on the other points of, introducing computing in more subjects, a lot of the people that come into the tech sector didn't do computer science. I did engineering, my husband did chemistry, plenty of other people out there with journalism, philosophy, all that kind of thing. Let's introduce tech in schools in all the places where it's used in the real world. And I think we'll get more kids realising the power of it.
And just to pick up on the equalities and diversity issue, and I think if you said to someone at school, do you want to do computing science? Some will say yes, some might say no. But if you actually reframe the discussion, say, would you like to study something which could have a societal good, it could address climate change, could do something positive, and reframe that in a slightly different way, I think you're likely to get a slightly different response. And I think as well, when companies advertise the opportunities that are available, think about the imagery on the adverts, think about the language that's used. Could it appeal? Could it actually turn people off? Or could the language be more inclusive and perhaps attract a wider and more diverse range of individuals, including people who are neurodivergent? So I think it's something about how it's kind of framed. And the question about, are there too many degrees? I think when you look at the numbers, on apprenticeships, it's been climbing steadily over the last few years. So I think it's definitely changed and swung there. And institutions, higher education institutions that have traditionally offered degrees are also offering graduate apprenticeships now. We touched on Napier, there's other universities that do that as well. So it is changing. I think the challenge point is with the influence of young people, particularly around parents, career staff, helping them to understand how the world's moved on, and actually, in many cases, an apprenticeship route is an equally good option, and in some cases a better option for the individual who's looking to progress. So just some thoughts on that.
You want to come in there?
I was going to say, I remember back, I was speaking at a school event back in 1996, I think it was, and there was a guy there called Alistair McGregor, who was a school kid, and he was just too smart, and he was starting to annoy me because he found a bug in Windows kernel, and I knew about it, and he started asking me all these questions about this bug. It was getting quite embarrassing, so I said to him, if you shut up and speak to me after, I'll give you a job for the summer at Microsoft, which we didn't really have a way of bringing him in, so I just expensed taxi receipts to pay him. So because we didn't have a program at that point in time to bring these interns and people in, so I just had loads of taxi receipts, and so he worked for us for the summer, and he was amazing. And then he went to university for a year, and then he worked for another summer, and then he went back to university for a year, and then he came back and went, I'm not going back in third year. It's I learn more here than I do there. I want a job. He's a job. So he was only 19 at the time, and Alistair was one of the top BizTalk guys at the time. And I tried to convince him to go back to university, and he refused. So we hired him, and he worked for us for quite a few years. And then he must have been only 23 at the time, and then he went on and he said, look, I'm into music, I'm going to go and work for Rockstar North. And he's now head of digital. He's actually global head of audio for Rockstar North. And he's amazing. And that just shows you that a kid, it was actually back speaking at my school in Dunfermline. So a kid in Dunfermline, you know, had an aspiration to have a career, started down the university route and then dropped out. And I go and speak to him quite often still. You know, he's in his 40s now, you know, driving around in his fancy car with a nice life. And so that's what we need to start to do as well. Just that aspiration of young children to get better. When I first was at school, I remember a guy a couple of years older than me called Ian Fraser. He got a job in a computer company, and when I was still running around on my rally grifter, he had a 944 Porsche. And I was like, I would love something like that, you know. And I think if you can just get these role models for somebody to look up to go and try, because the opportunity is there. And one of the beautiful things about this industry, you know, with a kind of £400 or £500 computer, you've got the world at your fingertips. One of the other things that's super important, if you look at the company we've started, we've built a cloud solution that's massive. And you could never have done that 10, 15 years ago, because before the advent of the cloud, you didn't have access to that amount of resources and computing power at your fingertips for a relatively low price. So one of the things that we need to start to articulate is that we should start pushing people to start building applications on the shoulders of giants. You know, Microsoft spent probably 100 billion building Azure, you know, AWS have done the same. So what we should really be doing is starting pushing people into the industry to look at the applicability of computing and actually build real world solutions to help on the back of the unlimited power that's at their fingertips for a relatively low price. So that's the kind of things that we need to start articulating as an industry to show and inspire people to come in.
So before I move on in the subject matter, because we've got 12 minutes left and I think we could go on for a good couple of hours on this, I'm just going to talk about retention, because retention's come up in the questions in from the audience. So how do we, you know, SMEs retain and you know, keep that talent in the companies when they're competing against big companies with bigger, you know, bigger benefits package and stuff? And I'll put it to the whole panel. And then also retention for women who've come into digital. How do we retain them when they've got the job in that respect? And retention in terms of, you know, from public sector, how do we compete against, you know, higher salaries and holidays and all the other benefits of being able to afford a 944 Porsche and not have to go to work in a grifter still when you're 45 years of age? So panel, what do you think are the remedies for that? I think you're going to jump in there, Kate.
Yeah, I was going to say on retention. So before I started at CoClan, I was previous role was head of engineering for a business unit in a financial services company. So retention was something I'm passionate about all the time. And And I think key thing is training and development. You know, if your staff can see a way forwards, a way to grow their skills, and a way to, you know, shape their knowledge within the company, then they stay. We've seen that many times. And one of the interesting things we're starting to see at CodeClan is more businesses coming to us and looking to retrain staff. So it might be that, you know, with the advance of technology, you're needing less of the admin side, or they know your company really well. Why not retrain them into the tech sector? You know, fill some of those jobs, some of those gaps that you've got. Take those same people that've got many years of company knowledge and put them in a different role. And you know, that loyalty or that, you know, attention that you've shown them will be really rewarded in terms of loyalty. And I think the same with the apprenticeship programs. Having people, you know, having apprentices, they do tend to stay with you a bit longer from my experience, because you've invested in them and you've shown that you value them and their skills, and they have that sort of inbuilt loyalty. And if you can keep that up through their lifetime, they're more likely to stay. I'll let other people jump in then.
No more attention from the panel. I'm going to go to Peter, because you've had a question directed at you as well from Sharon. And with challenge, the opportunity isn't always there for people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Focusing on social mobility can open new channels.
Yeah.
Your views?
I mean, I came from a usually deferment, right? It's not exactly privileged at all. It was a pretty poor school, to be honest. And but I'm really passionate about this, actually. So one of the things I do is part of one of the roles I do is I run the alumni for Microsoft in the UK, but I have a global role looking after social mobility, because and I think you just take opportunity. I mean, we've got an apprenticeship program, so we hire young adults. We've taken people from lots of different backgrounds. What we found is the ones that are the most hungry for it have done the best. As I said, we've had 7 firsts and 4 2-1s. And the ones who got, and they all got treated the same, and the ones who got the first were the ones that were the hungriest, and some of them, all the people that came from a really poor background did the best at university, because they had a chance, and they're coming, we've got a wall at the back of our room, what was the best thing about working here? And one of the people wrote, I got a mortgage, So this is somebody who was brought up in a rented house with their parents, has just bought a place for themselves. So it's that kind of stuff that this industry can do. So I think it's really important that we, give people the opportunity. And going back to Estonia, they came out of communism in 1991. These people had nothing, and they've grasped the opportunity. So I think one of the things we need to educate people is to grasp the opportunity that you get given. But social mobility is very, very important. But just going back to that point, you don't need a lot of money to actually start in the IT industry. What we're finding is really successful is people doing HNDs first and then joining us. That seems to work for them. It seems to work for us. They go to university in 3rd year, so they've got only 2 years at university. They only go to university 1 day a month when it's an apprenticeship, and then they work for 4 days. I can't remember exactly what we pay the people in 4th year at university, so don't kill me if it's wrong, but it's round about 28,000 a year. So our 4th year our 4th year university students that are doing a graduate apprenticeship are getting paid 28 grand a year to go to university 1 day a week. Go to university 1 day a month, but we give them a day off as well to actually do their studies. So, that apprenticeship model neutralizes a lot of the kind of people that can't, necessarily get in there. So I think that's something that we should be looking at. I think one of the things we need to really push and shout about is the fact that apprentices are a first choice, not a second choice. When I did my apprenticeship, I did it for economic reasons to begin with, and people deemed that was a second pathway into work. But the one thing I'm loving is the fact that EY and the accountancy companies and the lawyer companies now are doing apprenticeships in law and accounting as well. So I think really we need to shout the fact that apprenticeships are a first choice. I heard this guy on the tube a couple of weeks ago going, my son was offering an apprenticeship, but I've made him go to Loughborough University because he's going to get paid much more when he actually comes out than he would do if he did an apprenticeship. That's absolute bullshit. The people that are coming out with apprenticeships are actually getting paid more than full-time university students at the moment. So I think that's something we need to think about. So you were going to say something?
I would just come in on that, just that awareness piece at schools, like it is not advocated enough of like college route, university routes, apprenticeship, like all of it usually is just go to university. That's kind of the push you get. So yeah, there's a massive piece around that. And then exactly what Peter's saying about those stories. Kids don't know who, like, well, they might not know who For It is, or they might not know who, like, you know, like little companies are. They know Microsoft, obviously, but they do know like those stories, and they care about those stories. Like, you know, hearing Peter coming from a council estate, and then they know that that's their area and someone's made it, like, and now they're a CEO. Like, that's amazing, and that's what 12-year-olds can relate to, as opposed to come work for this brand company that they have no idea what it is or what they're doing. But it's those stories that we need to, and we've got in Scotland. We should be absolutely capitalising on that and sharing it. Yeah, I think there's lots that we could do, and like you say, back to basics. That's not a hard thing, but we should be doing more of it.
So I'm conscious we've got 5 minutes, and I've got an email from the organiser saying we're not allowed to lock the doors and keep you here hostage for longer for keeping this conversation going. I want to flip onto a happier note, and you gave me an E earlier on, as in Estonia, not as in a pill. Just want to point that out. You know, Estonia comes in quite a lot. I'm going to hug you later. But Estonia comes up quite a lot in terms of kind of de facto standard. I've 10 years. 6 years in this role, but 10 years hearing all about Estonia this, Estonia that. Some great stuff in Northern Ireland, which somebody else has pointed out in the questions. But ideally, panel, what are we, what's going well? What have we successes in? I know we've got SDS are saying about all the different apprentice stuff that's there, but what else can we stand up and be proud of in Scotland in terms of skills and closing that gap?
I think I'm going to say CodeClan. I think we should be proud of what CodeClan has done. The number of students that we've got through, I think we're over 2,000 people trained now. Just looking for the nods to check I've got the figure right. Yeah, it's been immensely successful. I've been with CodeClan for a year, but before that I hired lots of people from CodeClan as an engineering manager because I love what they did. I think it's a really powerful thing that we've got in Scotland, and it can help us fill that gap maybe a bit quicker than we can through the school and universities routes. So we really should be looking to help more people get through that space.
I know I've given lots of doom and gloom stats, but to kind of end on a positive, it's all fixable. I absolutely believe that. So, for example, in the school I taught, if you ask most schools for like uptake wise, they would have typically maybe two third year classes or 3 third-year classes, maybe 1 higher class. They might not even have enough kids to do an advanced higher class, maybe just 3. Our school, statistically wise, we were, and have been for a long time, presented the most amount of kids in the council. The best uptake gender-wise. We had 7 third-year classes, 4 National 5 classes, 3 higher classes and 1 advanced higher class. And the advanced higher class has never dipped below like 13 kids in years. So it can be done, but I think one big piece is like we really need to bring industry and education together so much more to talk about it. If anybody who knows a teacher, you'll know that they just don't have the time. It's impossible, well, very difficult to get a teacher out of school, but the worlds need to collide so much more. Like it's these people on the ground, the teachers, but then it's also the industry who we want to pair up. Like we need to bring them together more often and champion that, because there's so much great work being done at every stage, schools, college, university and in industry, but it's just not joined up enough. But I mean, like it doesn't seem like a million miles away to do it. That seems like a really easy fix. Let's get everybody together and solve it. And like that, there's amazing good stories out there. I won't name them all, but brilliant stuff happening. We just need to see that replicated across the country, really.
If I could just come in on that point, we have run a programme for a number of years called Tech Experts into Schools, where we actually bring industry to come into the classroom and talk to young people about what it's like to actually work in the sector. And that breaks down some of the misconceptions. And I think what's been really helpful is some of the discussions that have emerged across the secondary schools, because it has challenged the perceptions not only of the young people, but also of teachers and also of kind of career staff. So that's been quite powerful. And I think also the work in programming clubs, which I know is a big focus within the Scottish Technology Ecosystem Review, that's another way of getting a wider range of young people interested in tech careers going forward. So some good practice out there.
That's we used to, before COVID, we used to run these kind of training sessions. So we'd have a couple of senior developers run training courses for school kids. And it's interesting because I think we've just actually hired, in fact, one of them just graduated, actually came to one of those early courses, which is amazing. And I think that's one of the things I think we need to get back to. And it's something we've not done actually, so it's a shame on me. So maybe I should get moving on that again. But you know, I think it's important, this relationship, as Tony said, about the relationship between, you know, primary, secondary, FE college, HE, you know, university, and then employer. And it's actually getting that all together. So we tend to have a really good relationship with the colleges now while people are actually doing their HND. So we know kind of who we're going to hire or have an idea who we're going to kind of speak to when they get finished their HND. And then once they get their HND, we then kind of go through this assessment program and bring them into us. They're actually useful. That's going to sound dreadful. This is actually useful from day one. That's terrible. They actually kind of are functioning as part of the business from day one. You know, we've got this path into QA. They get an understanding of kind of good code. Then we move them into development. So they're actually working all the way through. And I think that's, when it comes to successes, you know, I think one of the things that's important in this country, right? We've got clean water, clean air and freedom. And I think they're one of the most fundamental privileges in life now, if you see what's going on in some of the other places. So the fact that we've got so much right is one of the big problems, right? We don't have to worry about getting, you know, kind of not eating or not getting kind of clean water. It's kind of important, right? So the big problems are fixed. It's kind of the smaller ones we've got to focus on. And I think that it all starts from education.
I think we've actually just run out of time, and I was going to go through a curveball question into the panel, which I've saved, but I'm actually going to put them on the spot. If you can spare with me 2 more minutes, if that's okay with everybody. So I know we had a set question about how do we close the gap. I think we've closed, you know, in terms of getting the sectors to work together. But I'm going to be a complete bastard. If I was going to give you, I'm going to give you a billboard, right? And it's going to sit in the middle of Edinburgh or Glasgow. What would you put on it to entice people to come into digital skills? Tony?
I don't know what to put on it, but I know the hashtag that it should be. And it should be hashtag choose computing science. Can't say STEM because kids don't pick STEM at school, like on their subject choices. It's computing. and it's that language, we find that very challenging, like when kids and like people are doing their subject choices, they're like, oh, but I'm picking STEM, I'm doing science, and you're like, yeah, but that's not tech. And tech isn't a subject at school, it's computing science. So someone else can fill in the billboard, but hashtag choose computing science, please, would be amazing.
Kerry?
I'd put the salaries. I'd be mercenary. Like, this is what you can earn, you know. And I think that would, you know, maybe people don't realise what a really good career you can have. So stick some salaries up there. This is what you could earn.
Phil?
Well, we do a lot of infographics. SDSO is like a good diagram. So something which actually shows where the career pathways can take people. And you can have the salaries on that. But I think just to explode the myths about that it's not a linear path that could take you in lots of different directions, and just putting that up there in lights would be quite powerful, I think.
Peter?
I mean, I would go a different route, right? Because I don't really think about money too much when it comes to personally. I still remember when I got made a director of Microsoft, and my boss phoned me up to tell me what my salary was, and it was on the phone because he was in the States, and I was actually like jumping up and down around the office, punching the air, and trying to be cool at the same time. So he didn't realise I was actually so pleased. But I would actually just say, you know, freedom is one of the most important commodities in life, and the tech industry gives you freedom. You know, and that's across, freedom to work there as you want to work, earn the money you want to earn, and have the career you want to have, because it's such a rich. So I would actually go down the freedom route, and that, you know, this industry gives you freedom for success and to live the life how you want to live it.
Cool, thank you very much. Probably mine would be from bassoon playing and opera to CDO. You can learn more about that later on. It's a weird story in itself. But I want to say thank you very much from our panel. Kerry Shaw, Tony Scullion, Peter Proud and Phil Ford. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.